The taxi slowed as we turned onto my street. I gave the driver a polite, "Here is fine," though we were still a house away. I didn't want to be dropped right in front. I needed a moment to understand what I was looking at. There was a U-Haul in my driveway. I paid. The fare stepped out and pulled my suitcase over the gravel. The wind tugged at my coat as I walked, squinting against the glare of afternoon sun. My house, my quiet, narrow, two-story home, stood exactly as I left it this morning. Except now the side gate hung open and a man stood hunched at my front door. Joel. He didn't hear me at first. His shoulder was angled toward the lock, his hand wrapped around a slim metal tool. The movement was careful, practiced. Not frantic, not accidental. The kind of movement you make when you've done this before. "Joel," I said quietly. He jumped, dropping the tool. It hit the porch with a faint clink. He turned to face me, pale and wide-eyed. "You were supposed to be gone," he said. I didn't answer. I reached into my coat pocket and pressed the power button on my phone. I tapped the screen to open the dial pad. My fingers didn't shake. Behind him, the front door remained shut. I hadn't been gone more than 6 hours, and yet I felt as though I were walking into someone else's house. One with strangers and plans I hadn't been part of. "Mom, wait, this isn't what it looks like," Joel said, quickly stepping forward. I took one step back and raised my phone without looking at him. The U-Haul's engine was still warm. A corner of a rolled rug poked out from the back. Joel moved to block the view. "You didn't tell anyone your flight was canceled." I looked past him and saw a second figure at the side of the house, Alana, carrying a box. Alana froze when she saw me. The box in her arms sagged slightly under its own weight. She adjusted her grip, then straightened with an almost mechanical smile. "We didn't know you were coming back today," she said, her voice too light, too fast. "Is everything okay with your flight?" I didn't answer her either. I stepped around Joel up the porch steps and unlocked the door. The key stuck for a moment. Something had jammed the lock. I pressed harder. It clicked. Inside, the house felt off. There was too much space where there shouldn't have been. The hallway mirror was gone. So was the old oak coat rack, Richard's coat rack. It had been there for 30 years. I stepped into the living room and stopped. The corner where my reading chair should have been was bare. The lamp was unplugged, leaning awkwardly against the wall. The small wool rug that sat beneath the chair had been rolled and was missing entirely. I turned toward them. Joel hovered in the doorway, Alana behind him, still holding the box. "Where is my chair?" I asked. Joel blinked. "What? My chair? Where is it?" He glanced at Alana, then back at me. "It's in the truck. We were just rearranging a few things. Thought we'd surprise you." "You were going to love it," Alana added quickly. "The space feels bigger, more open." I moved past them into the dining room. The sideboard had been shifted. A few of the smaller framed photos were missing. I didn't pause. The kitchen was next. The air felt hollow. I opened the pantry. Rows of dry goods were gone, the spice rack half empty. Even the cast iron skillet gone from the hook above the stove. I didn't say a word. I walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat. Alana stepped forward, still cradling the box. "We thought you were away for 2 weeks." I looked down at my hands. My palms were still damp from the suitcase handle. Joel said something, but I didn't catch it. My eyes had landed on a missing frame from the hallway wall. By dusk, the house was quiet again. Joel and Alana had gone out to talk, leaving the front door slightly ajar, as if it were still theirs to come and go. I locked it behind them and sat by the kitchen window, the light from the street lamp spilling across the counter. The empty spaces in each room pressed against me like missing teeth. When the doorbell rang, I assumed it was them. But standing on my porch was Mr. Gleason, from next door holding a folded sheet of paper. "Evening, Karis," he said, his voice uneasy. "I wasn't sure if you'd left already. Thought you should see this." He handed me the paper. It was a flyer printed on glossy paper with staged photographs of my living room, my old rug, my sofa, even my curtains. In bold letters across the top, open house, this Sunday. Move-in ready, and below my address. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My name wasn't anywhere on the flyer, just Joel's contact number printed beneath a real estate logo I didn't recognize. I walked to the living room and placed the flyer on the table, smoothing the creases with my fingers. A listing date, an asking price, photos taken without my knowledge. When Joel and Alana returned, I was waiting for them. "Who took these pictures?" I asked, holding the flyer. Alana's eyes darted toward Joel. "We were going to tell you," Joel cut her off. "It's not like that, Mom. You never use the upstairs. We thought maybe. You thought what I asked, quietly, that it was time to downsize. You'd make money. We'd all move somewhere better." I watched him closely. He wasn't ashamed. He was just explaining as though this were a business proposal gone slightly off track. I placed the flyer back on the table. "Who is the agent?" He hesitated. "Alana's cousin. She works out of Manchester." I nodded once. "Good. I'll need her number." Neither of them moved as I reached for my phone and began scrolling for my lawyer's contact list. By morning, I'd stopped waiting for sleep to come. The light from the window was pale, cutting through the blinds in narrow lines. I went straight to the study and unlocked the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. The metal clinked in that small, satisfying way it always had. Inside were the documents I kept for moments like this, the ones I hoped I'd never need. I laid them out neatly on the desk, the deed to the house with my signature. My name alone, notarized and dated. Beneath it, the letter revoking the power of attorney Joel once held after my surgery. I remembered the day I'd had it stamped, just a precaution, my lawyer had said then. I hadn't thought of it since. I sealed both papers in a document envelope and placed them in my tote. Then I made coffee, the bitter kind that keeps you alert, and waited until the law office opened. At 1 in the afternoon, I sat across from Mr. Everett, the same lawyer who'd handled Richard's will years ago. His expression didn't change much as I explained, but the pen in his hand paused mid-note. "They've misrepresented property ownership," he said evenly. "That's a serious offense, Karis. We'll issue a cease and desist to the realtor today. No sale can proceed without your consent." He made copies of everything, returned the originals, and promised a letter by morning. As I stood to leave, he added quietly, "You did the right thing. Document everything from here on out." I drove home without turning on the radio. The silence filled the car. The house was still. No movement, no voices. The U-Haul was gone. For a moment, I thought they had finally left. Then I saw it, one more cardboard box sitting in my bedroom doorway. A thick black marker had labeled it in bold letters, "Storage." I set down my bag, tore the tape open, and looked inside. At the top was the folded quilt I'd made for Joel when he left for college. Underneath, wrapped in newspaper, was the silver-framed photo from our wedding. Joel came back just after lunch, knocking once before letting himself in, like it was still his home. I didn't move from the armchair. The envelope from the lawyer rested on the table beside me, unopened but present. He saw it, glanced at it, and looked away. "I know it looks bad," he said, pacing near the hallway. "But you always said the house would come to me someday. You told Dad that more than once." I didn't respond. He weighted hands on his hips. "You said it. That it would be easier than dealing with paperwork later. You just never updated the deed, that's all." I still said nothing. Silence made people explain more than questions ever did. Joel sat across from me, leaning forward, now voice softer. "You don't need all of it, Mom. You barely use the upstairs anymore. We were just trying to make things easier." I stood and walked into the den. The cabinet beneath the window was always where Richard kept his watch box. It had been untouched for 5 years, just a small wooden case with the initials RL engraved on the lid. When I opened it, the velvet lining was bare. The space where the matching journal should have been was empty too. I closed the cabinet, walked to the kitchen, and picked up the phone. The first shop didn't recognize the description. The second said, "Actually, yes. Brought in yesterday afternoon. Real clean piece. Vintage leather band gold casing." I asked if they remembered the man. Tall, probably in his 40s. Wore a wedding ring. Dark jacket. It was Joel. I thanked them, hung up, and returned to the living room. Joel had turned the television on as if the conversation had ended. I stood behind him. "Where's the journal?" I asked. He muted the screen. "What journal?" "You know which one." He didn't answer. I walked upstairs to check the guest room. The closet door was ajar, and behind a stack of folded towels I found another box marked simply with my name. The letter was ready by midday. Mr. Everett had it printed, signed, and stamped with the firm's seal. I took it directly to the notary next door, had my signature witnessed, and left with 3 copies. One for them, one for me, one for the file. When I returned, the house was quiet again. Joel and Alana had left sometime in the afternoon. I didn't check where they went. I just waited. At dusk, I heard the front door creak open without a knock. Joel walked in slower than usual, with that same practiced casualness he always used when he knew he'd gone too far. I didn't get up. The envelope was already on the coffee table, sealed and addressed. "What's this?" he asked, flipping it over. "A formal trespass notice," I said. "Signed and notarized. You have 48 hours to remove any personal items you brought into this house. After that, you're no longer permitted on this property." His eyes narrowed. "You can't be serious." "I am." Joel shook his head, let out a bitter laugh. "You're cutting us off over a misunderstanding." "No," I said, standing. "I'm correcting one." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him, like he had been dealing with a softer version all along and didn't know what to do with the one who stood her ground. He slapped the envelope back onto the table. "You really want to go to war over this?" "No," I said. "But I will if I have to." The door opened again. Alana stepped in, arms crossed, her expression tight. She didn't speak, just stood there behind Joel, silent and watching. When he turned to leave, she lingered for a second longer. Her eyes met mine, hard and unreadable. Then she followed him out. I stood at the window until their car pulled out of the driveway. When I went back upstairs, I found one more box tucked behind the guest room dresser. This one was labeled Mom's Books. They came early, just after sunrise. The rumble of the U-Haul echoed down the street before I saw it pull into the driveway again. This time, no voices, no commotion, just the sound of the ramp being lowered, the dull thump of boxes being moved. Joel didn't knock. He entered without a word, heading straight to the guest room. Alana followed him, wearing oversized sunglasses, though the house was still dim. She passed me in the hallway and didn't look my way. They worked in silence. No pleading, no explanations. Just cardboard scraping across hardwood. They took only what I'd told them to. Nothing more. Nothing less. By noon, they were gone. I waited until the truck disappeared down the road before I picked up my keys and coat. The drive to the pawn shop took 20 minutes, long enough for the tension in my shoulders to settle into something quieter. The man behind the counter recognized me. He didn't ask questions when I described the watch, just nodded, walked to the back, and returned with the box. The same scuffs along the edge, the same slight creak in the hinge. I opened it, just to be sure. 800, he said, already ringing it up. I didn't argue. When I got home, I went straight to the den, opened the cabinet, and placed the watch box exactly where it had been. I locked the drawer and slid the key into the small porcelain bowl Richard had made in college. It was chipped at the rim, but still solid. I didn't cry. That night, I made tea and sat in the chair they had tried to remove. The house was still, lighter in a way. Later, I took the remaining documents, the deed, the notice, the letters, and filed them in the metal safe I kept in the closet. The door clicked shut with finality. As I turned to leave the room, a soft thud echoed from downstairs. I paused, listening, then followed the sound to the front porch, where an envelope had been slid under the door. The envelope held nothing but silence. No note, no apology. Just the spare key that had gone missing from the kitchen drawer weeks ago. I slipped it into the back of my desk and didn't mention it to anyone. The next day, I went to the hardware store to have the locks changed. While I waited, I ran into Claire from 3 houses down. She touched my arm gently and leaned in as if whispering might soften the weight of what she had to say. "I saw the truck last week," she said. "Joel told us you'd already moved to Oregon, that the place was his now." I blinked slowly. "I see." She looked away, guilty. I didn't know what to believe, but I should have asked you. "I'm sorry, Karis." "It's all right," I said, though it wasn't. Later that afternoon, Mr. Gleason rang the bell again, holding a small bag of screws and a new deadbolt. "Figured I'd help you with that front door," he said. "You were never meant to disappear, Karis." I stood aside and let him in. He didn't ask for details, just worked quietly, his tools laid out in neat rows on a folded towel. We didn't talk much. I handed him a cup of water, and he handed me back something I hadn't realized I'd lost space to breathe. When he was done, he gave the door a firm push and nodded in satisfaction. "That'll hold. If they try anything again, they won't get far." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. After he left, I walked through each room slowly, making note of what was gone, what had been touched, what had never mattered to them at all. In the hallway, I noticed one of the old family photos had been flipped backward on the shelf. I set it right and dusted the frame. That evening, I made a list of things to donate, items that no longer felt like mine. I boxed them carefully, one by one, and left the last open on the kitchen counter. Inside was a vase from Joel's wedding. The flower bed beneath the kitchen window had been crushed by the U-Haul's tires. The soil was compacted, the herbs broken at the stems, some roots exposed like bones in a field. I spent the morning clearing it out, knees in the dirt, hands steady. The work didn't ask for permission. It just needed doing. I laid new stones along the edge, flatter ones this time, arranged in a pattern I hadn't used before. I planted marigolds where the mint used to be, knowing they'd hold their shape better in the coming frost. The act of rebuilding didn't bring back what was lost. It just reminded me that I still chose what grew here. Inside, I rehung the mirror they'd taken down. It had a crack in the top corner, barely visible unless you were looking. I'd kept it for years because Richard liked the way it reflected the light in the afternoons. I wiped it clean and centered it over the hall table, anchoring it with new brackets. I was moving a load of towels from the washer when I spotted something behind the dryer. A bundle of fabric wedged in the narrow gap between the wall and the machine. I pulled it free and unfolded it. Richard's gardening gloves. They were stiff from age but still carried that faint mix of dust and soap. I turned them over in my hands, tracing the worn leather where his fingers used to rest. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I took them out to the shed, laid them gently on the shelf beside the trowel and twine, and closed the door behind me. In the afternoon, I trimmed the hedge near the garden gate, where Joel had once backed the truck in too close and knocked a board loose. I nailed it back into place. Then I locked the side gate and brought the key inside, hanging it on a small hook near the sink. By evening, the house was still. No more boxes, no more footsteps. I opened the safe once more, reviewed the folder, and placed one final document inside. I had the new locks installed on a Thursday morning. The man who came out didn't ask questions, just nodded when I pointed to each door, front, side, back, and showed him where the old bolts had been worn down. He worked quickly, cleanly. By noon, every entrance had been replaced with high-grade steel. He handed me 3 new keys, all identical. I kept one on my ring. The other 2 went into the safe. I didn't change my number. I didn't block theirs. The silence was louder that way. And I didn't send a message to Joel. He would know eventually when the quiet lasted longer than he expected it to. In the afternoon, I opened the folder one last time. Inside were the deed, the lawyer's letters, the notice of trespass, and now the receipt for the locksmith. I flipped through them once, then slid the papers back into their sleeves. The safe clicked shut with that same deep, hollow sound I'd come to rely on. Not dramatic, just final. The house smelled faintly of eucalyptus from the new floor cleaner I'd used earlier. I left the windows open a little longer than usual, letting the breeze move through each room before drawing the curtains closed. In the living room, the reading chair was back in its corner. The lamp glowed soft above it. My tea sat cooling on the side table, untouched. I walked through the kitchen one last time, checked the back door, then paused in the hallway by the mirror. My reflection looked older today, but not smaller. Not worn. At the front door, I turned the bolt, slowly heard it slide into place. The sound was firm, solid. This time I didn't pause or glance behind me. I locked the door from the inside. Then I walked away.